Hi, everybody. Thanks for attending today's webinar, Winning Competitions Through Supplier Collaboration. My name is Jason Stegent, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. A few housekeeping notes before we get started and hand over the presentation to today's presenters. Today's session shouldn't last longer than 45 minutes or so. There will be a live Q&A at the end of today's webinar, so if you have any questions for our presenters, you'll see the Q&A box underneath the speaker info box. Just type in your question, click submit. We'll answer as many of them as we can at the end of today's webinar. We are recording today's event. It'll be available on demand within 24 hours. We always get questions if we're going to be recording the event, if we're going to send an on-demand link. We are, so be on the lookout for an email from us no later than tomorrow on how to access the on-demand version, reinforce what you learned. For folks that couldn't make it live, you can obviously see what you missed. A few things about the environment that you're in. There is no dial-in option for attendees. You're going to be hearing this through your PC speakers or through your mobile device. The audio is not loud enough for you. Turn it up. Make sure that the volume on your PC is up. Or if you're in a cubicle-based environment, we always recommend headphones. We always get the question, I want to view the slide deck in full screen mode. How do I do that? There's a min-max option on all of the windows. Simply maximize your slide deck window. You can view that slide deck in full screen mode. You'll see some icons at the bottom of the screen that enable you to do a number of different things. You can share it through social channels. You can email out of this. If you have any support questions that need to be troubleshooted, hopefully not, but if you do have any, you can see the FAQ or the support box down below and get any answers to your questions. You'll also see a resource icon. It's the one with a paperclip. There is a piece of content down below, a CBX solution brochure that will enable you to learn more about CBX and their solution set. And then there is a survey, a link to a survey that one of our presenters today is promoting. He'll tell you more about it in today's presentation. But we'd love for you to click the link on that survey. It'll take you to the survey platform. It's really brief. I know that Joel, one of our presenters, would love your feedback. And now I just want to briefly introduce today's speakers before I hand it over to them. We're going to start out with Joel Ma. Joel is the Business Strategy Director in Asia Pacific for Hallmark Cards Limited. Joel's going to start things off. He'll take up the majority of the time for today's session. His piece is going to be anywhere from 25 to 30 minutes. We're then going to bring in Eric Linksweiler. Eric is the Senior Vice President of CBX Software in the Americas. Eric's going to go over 3 or 4 slides or so, spend anywhere from 7 to 10 minutes on his piece, and then after Eric, we're going to come back to me and move forward with a live Q&A. So with that being said, without further ado, I'm now going to hand the floor over to Joel. Joel, take it away.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you all for being with me today. First, maybe let me introduce briefly about myself. I've been with Hallmark Cards more than 27 years, and majority of the time I have been involved in the supply chain management more than 25 years. So I have the oversight of product development, sourcing, engineering, and program execution, and as well as innovation. So previously, I was actually on 2 expat assignments to Asia with Hallmark Cards, and I'm still with Hallmark Cards and focusing on business strategy. I have partnered with more than 300 suppliers in Asia, Europe, North America, Central America, and South America as well. And I'm very passionate about supply relationship management, and that's why today's topic is exactly in my cup of tea, that I feel strongly about leveraging supply collaboration to win the competition. And so without further ado, let's get into the material that we're going to share today. And first, actually, in a recent survey by the A.T. Kearney, a consulting firm, and the survey is on assessment of effective procurement. And there are 3 main themes coming out of the survey, which highlighting the uncertainties with global development. And the first one is the rising populism and protectionism. With the anti-globalization sentiment going on in the world. So there will be definitely impact and also put global trade and other cross-border flows at risk. And it really calls for a change of the business model, how we work with overseas or global supply chain partners. And that is a change in order for us to do that. And the second uncertainty really pops out of the survey was the technological innovation. I think everybody is aware with everything advanced in terms of technology and the cyber attack and the technology trend, it's really kind of having a conflict, meaning that we are yearning for the innovative technology to help us do business faster, cheaper, and more accurate. But in the meantime, there's also a risk factor kind of countering that. So how do we balance that? And that is another type of uncertainty going on. Now, the third kind is the changing consumer trend. And we know with the population of millennials growing, actually soon will surpass the baby boomers. And we know the share economy concept is really booming as well. So from different kinds of product sharing, services sharing, actually is getting into a new kind of dynamic and innovative business models. And one thing that also coming out of the consumer trend changing, switching, is the voice of the customer. They want to be heard. They want to be accessible to businesses so that businesses are listening to their voice and to what they're saying they want. And out of all that is really creating a VUCA world that we would call it. VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And it's really the term introduced by the U.S. Army War College. It was used to describe the multilateral world at the end of the Cold War when it was over. And it really highlights the kind of uncertainties we're faced with right now. So as we're talking about the consumer product industry, we also see that there are a lot of challenges faced by the consumer product industry. And the first one was the decline in brand loyalty. And honestly, 30% of the brands that the consumer buy now only must have. That means remaining 70%, they can switch brand anytime they want. And it all depends on whether the products or the brand aligning with their health and wellness consciousness. They're concerned about safety. They're also concerned about corporate citizenship and transparency. And this is all being shared by Bob Renner at Deloitte on the consumer product industry outlook in 2016. But I think the same will go true for 17 and also next year as well. And the second one was about the uncertainty on consumer spending. And truthfully, a lot of the consumer now, they kind of paying very close attention to how they spend their wages, the income wisely, so that they can balance out the revenue, income, and expense on a daily basis. And not just the U.S. economy, actually in Asia, in Europe as well, most of the consumers are watching it and to see how they spend their precious income cautiously. The third one is the increased regulatory scrutiny, and we know with consumers putting more focus on product safety, they're more aware about sustainability and transparency issue of how the products get to their home. All this kind of putting the government involvement as in U.S. as well as international market. So food safety is a number one example. In apparel, footwear, even because of the labor resource involvement. So consumers are very much paying attention to it and also putting the government regulatory body to also put a lot of emphasis on the transparency issue as well on that. And then last one, which is not the least, which really impact consumer product industry is the ineffective innovation capabilities. So some of the example, the following two slides just highlighting some of the examples, but there are so many out there. And sometimes we ask, why most product launches fail? Well, the first one, for example, it has to do with the timing of the launch. So first example was the mosquito magnet, and it was launched in 2000. And there was no plan to ramp up if the product takes off. And so what happened is that the product was well received in the beginning, but the company did not plan it well. So then they have to move it to a mass production supply chain solution, which affected the quality. So quickly kind of have a negative impact on the perception of the product. And the second one is also related to timing of the launch, was with the Microsoft Windows Vista, launched in 2007. And there were many compatibility and performance issues that weren't worked out ahead of time. And so basically the product was not ready for launch. And then it fell short on the claim, and again, got negative feedback from the early product purchaser. The third example was the Coca-Cola C2, launched in 2004, tried to cater to the male consumer, and looking for a zero calorie, zero sugar content, but they want the original Coca-Cola taste. But somehow the company decided to launch a original Coca-Cola taste, but with half of the calories and sugar content, and that's not what the consumer looked for. So again, there was some issue with the product itself. Now, if you look at the next two, the Febreze Sand Stories and the Segway, they are also related to the product innovation aspect they're not thinking through. So in the Febreze example is that the company was trying to come up with a product concept combining music and scent. Well, but somehow it confused the consumer because of the ambiguity of the product concept. Is it a CD player for music, or is it really a scent diffuser? So there was issue there that consumers are not getting it, and it requires tremendous education. And with the Segway example, the product innovation was great, but then there's no market for it because they haven't figured out who will buy it and at what price. So these are just some quick examples highlighting the innovation in the consumer product industry is full of challenges, and it's not easy. And so the consumer product industry actually is a very sizable industry. I mean, in the United States, the consumer product market, actually in 2016, it reined in more than $650 billion. Now, in the ASEAN country, which is Asia, Southeast Asian countries, actually the forecast by 2020, the consumer product market will be $770 billion, which is a very sizable industry, and we know the growth in Asia, China, India, with the rising middle class, that is going to reach even higher level of the market for consumer products. Now, consumer products really all around us. I mean, honestly, we cannot do without it. We eat, drink, wear, entertain, we live, we work, we communicate with all these consumer products. So it's all around us on a daily basis. But it has a very high probability of new product launch failures. And based on one survey, actually, 75% of the new product launches failed to earn $7.5 million in the first year. So it's tough to get a lot of new product ideas and to have it be successful and receive comparable revenue goal target. So now then, this kind of call for tapping into external resources for new product development, because sometimes we know internally with the resource constraint. Now we might want to partner with some of our what we call strategic suppliers to help us get there and get there quicker and less risk. And this will drive to the business supply relationship management being a key element of the supply chain management arena. And out of that, truthfully, supply collaboration is what I emphasize on. And also, I've been meeting with a lot of different peer companies and procurement professional in the industry, and everybody is saying supply collaboration is so critical to value creation. So then you might ask, well, what does supply collaboration provide us in terms of benefits? Well, value creation is the key. But what does it mean? Well, it provides you lower cost, better quality, minimize risk exposure that I mentioned earlier, and speed to market as well. And then we also are able to leverage supplier's technical capabilities and resource. Of course, we try to drive a new product innovation. Actually, one of the company I recently ran into, which is a U.S. major brand company, they have it in their business goal, 50% of their sales in a year has to be coming from new product launches. So that's what they mean by keep their growth in terms of revenue and profit margin by putting in pipeline of new products. Of course, all of this will create the competitive advantage to help us win. That's what we want to do. Now, come to the supply collaboration. It's not all, positives and pluses. It also has its own set of challenges. So one set of researchers, Peterson and his colleagues, they did an interview with a lot of the customers who work with suppliers. So they kind of told a story about suppliers are like fish in the ocean. So then we, the buyers, are the fishermen, and the key challenge facing all the fishermen is how to put out the right bait, right, using the right bait so that we can pull up the right suppliers at the right time and get them to help us develop new products. But there are several problems associated with fishing. Number one, how do we know that we are using the right bait, right, to begin with? Number two, how do we know the right kinds of fish are even in the water where we fish? And most importantly, when we catch a fish, how do we know whether it is the right fish and whether we should keep it or throw it back in the water? And last but not least is how do we know the fish will follow through with the commitment if we decide to keep it? Now, so all these are not easy with the supply collaboration. But supply collaboration, it means different things to different companies, to different business leaders. And also it calls for different kinds of levels of commitment. So it depends on how much level of responsibility you give to the supplier. And supply collaboration also changes the way how business is managed, how business is done. And it involves alignment of our organizational cultures. And I'll come to this part in a little bit. Supply collaboration also is about how we cultivate and sustain the trust and knowledge sharing between us and the supplier. And the ultimate goal is that when we do supply collaboration, we hope and we aspire to become the customer choice of the supplier so that they build a strategic relationship with us and we can benefit both by working together closely on different levels. Now, so I mentioned about the different levels of supply collaboration. And in some of the research paper, we'll mention about supply collaboration through integration. Now, Das et al., there's a research paper in 2006 mentioned integration is motivated by the recognition of interdependency. I think I'm not talking about you doing supply collaboration with every single supplier in your supply base. It's not possible. And I believe that you do have your supplier segmentation based on the critical element, like the category you work with them, or the volume you have with the supplier. And so you feel that, well, with certain type of supplier, for example, strategic supplier, there's certain level of interdependency. You need them, but they also need you. So that's the integration we're talking about. And also the supply collaboration will be impacted by the different level of supply responsibility. So on the right-hand side of this slide, you'll see that there are 4 different levels of supplier integration or involvement collaboration. So the first level is there's no supply involvement. Basically, we as the buyer, we come up with the full design details and the product specification, and we're telling the supplier where to get the material. So basically, they just put it all together and deliver to us at the quality we want, at the price we want, and the time we want. Now, the second level is the informal supply involvement. So now we feel that, well, we probably need some input from our supplier to help us make the new product manufacturable, or maybe at an acceptable cost. So then we informally just asking supplier some question, get their input, insight. That's it. Now, the third level will be another step higher. Then we now coming into a formalized joint product development agreement. So in this agreement, we'll identify what product development activities are responsible by the supplier and which part is, as buyer, we are responsible to do. So that you might call this as a joint partnership on a formalized relationship. Last is the supplier fully responsible level. So basically, as a buyer, I have a concept, I have a destination I want to go, but now I'm expecting my strategic supplier to be responsible for designing it, laying out the roadmap how to get there, and all the new product development activities are being held by the supplier. Now, of course, they understand there are also trade-offs, meaning that they have the full responsibility, but we are the buyer. We'll have the ultimate say on whether we accept the outcome of their new product design concept or not. So then, earlier I mentioned about organizational culture. I believe the alignment of organizational culture between the buyer organization and the supplier organization are very, very important. So you probably have heard of it. There's a saying that culture would eat strategy for lunch. And it doesn't matter if you have the best procurement strategy, the best product development strategy, but the internal culture of our organization can really overwhelm and sometimes even negatively affecting the execution of the strategy. So that's the saying, culture eats strategy for lunch. So internal culture of an organization, we all know that. We live with, we behave like that. It's our personality of our company or of our organization. And culture also means shared beliefs, values, assumptions, norms, how we treat each other, how we treat the supplier. And also, a lot of the internal organizational culture is driven or is molded or shaped by our leadership. Now, it also affects the ways we conduct our business, so including our attitude toward trust and knowledge sharing, which both are very critical elements for effective supplier collaboration. So then you see on the right-hand side of the slide, I mentioned about the alignment of the organizational cultures between two organizations, the buyer organization and the supplier organization. The proper alignment will help productivity, engagement, and performance of both from both sides, because we'll put our resource to work on the new product development project. But it also will affect the success of supply collaboration and new product development. So that's why the organizational culture alignment is very critical element to enhance, enable supplier collaboration. Now, out of the supply collaboration I mentioned earlier about trust and knowledge sharing, actually there are some theories behind this. And researchers, academia, they already have done a lot of work on this area. One of them is called social capital theory. And if you look at the left-hand side diagram, you see the social capital includes many things within our organization, but also includes the trust and feelings of safety, right, participation. How can we help each other? So this social capital is basically saying resource within our organization, but it focuses on the relationship, focus on the trust, how to help facilitate our collective action or effort. And of course, out of this social capital theory, they highlight the trust, which will affect supply collaboration, and it can take place at multiple levels of an organization. And also it affects the way we share knowledge, share technology, share ideas with our suppliers in the formal or informal way. So when we come to knowledge sharing, there's actually another theory being already studied and proven, which is called resource-based view theory. And the definition of it is basically in every organization, you have some of the most valuable, rare, non-substitutable resources, and you want to protect those. You want to safeguard those, and you want to manage those resources effectively and how to allocate them. So through this, you will be able to create sustainable competitive advantages over your competitors. And that's why the collaborative work study going on is about how do we build that network between us and the supplier through supply collaboration. Now, we want to protect our own core competencies, which is our strength, which is something that will affect, our foundation of how we win. But then we also want to engage external resources like some of our strategic suppliers because of what they have that we can tap into, and at the end we will have this supply collaboration and partnership going on. So here I just show you an example as a tool. That when we talk about trust and knowledge sharing, actually if you look at this slide, SRM stands for Supplier Relationship Management and also Lean Migration Map. So now we're getting into a little bit of the strategic and executional level. So imagine yourself sitting in the current state, and you really want to get to the ideal state by having the best profit margin, by having the latest new product being launched in the market at lowest risk as possible, and also as quick as possible to the market. And think about all these sourcing models. You'll see different curve line. Basically, we start from the left with strategy and governance. Well, you got to have a strategy put in place to get to the ideal state. And also, you have to manage supplies performance. So there's a KPI set up. How do you do that? And internal organizational structure, do you just delegate your SRM and lean effort to a dedicated resource only, or do you want to embed that kind of responsibility eventually into procurement group, your team, because they work with the supplier directly? And then people is very important. How do you put the competency expectation into the job? I think most of the procurement organization, they would spend more than 50%, sometimes even 70% of the resources into execution versus the strategic planning, strategizing, how to set up for future, more predictive kind of procurement function. On the far right, you see the process and technology. And of course, everybody has EDI and mass transit. Those are kind of direct IT system processes to enable our execution. But in the future, you need to look at real-time exchange. How can we leverage the supplier's input quicker and more direct? And that's a very important piece of enabler for effective supplier collaboration as well. So with all this, let's summarize it. Supply collaboration takes time and a lot of focus from senior management all the way down, and also resource, because you spend time and maybe engineering team working with the supplier's engineering team. Supply collaboration needs to be powered by trust and knowledge sharing. To me, I think these two are most critical elements to make an effective and successful supply collaboration so we can win. Now, the supply collaboration I mentioned earlier, it will be affected, but also it can be enabled with the aligned organizational cultures between the buying organization and the supplying organization. To me, supply collaboration is a more sustainable path to long-term improved performance versus we only focus on immediate return. Not to say immediate return is not important, it's critical. But we want to build a longer-term sustainable path so that our performance can be on a sustainable growth. And it's very critical to the outcome of the survival or even winning our competition. So supply collaboration is important. Direct, I think, is a contributing role in new product development, and it will also help us better deploy our valuable and limited internal resources. And of course, last but not the least, I think supply collaboration will help establish competitive advantages over our competitors, which is why we're here. So before I finish my presentation, I just would like to explain a little bit about the Supply Collaboration Survey. I would like to seek for your input. The purpose of this survey is to collect empirical data related to supplier collaboration experience that you have had with strategic supplier on new product development. Now, who should participate? Actually, basically, anyone involved in the product development, procurement, sourcing, or supply chain individual, and also people who work in innovation area also would be great to participate. And I would love to have the senior management level or manager level, because you have had a lot of experience in how to work with the supplier in the past on new product development. Now, how to participate is really easy. So you can use the link provided in this slide, and it'll take you directly to the Survey Monkey. And I would appreciate you could complete the survey for me. It would take less than 20 minutes. And what you will get in return is that an executive summary of my survey findings I'll be shared with you through email when it's available. So hopefully you can participate and provide your experience with me for this survey. And I would like to end this presentation with a quote from Charles Darwin. So Charles Darwin has said before, in the long history of humankind, those who learn to collaborate and improvise most effectively have prevailed. So I do believe in the VUCA world today we're in, we no longer can just use all our internal resources to compete to win, because it's so costly and also may not be fast enough. But supply collaboration can help us get there. And that is one powerful platform or path that I would like to present, and hope we all agree and get into this mindset, how to work better with our supplier to launch new product and also to win our competition. So that's all I have. I really thank you for your patience. And next, I would like to pass it on to Eric. So Eric, please take it away.
Well, thank you, Joel. You know, I always find your thoughts on this topic very insightful and loaded with vital learning. I'm going to take just a few minutes to wrap up our session today, and my focus point is really around Joel's SRM and lean migration map diagram, leading to the ideal state for sourcing excellence. I think this provides for a real nice segue into a brief overview and an introduction of CBX. As you see here on this slide, and if you think back to Joel's comments just a few moments ago, the picture on the left is where Joel made some very interesting thoughts and gave us extreme imperative focus on what I found to be two vital points. One was that you must create a real-time exchange of information between buyers and sellers in order to achieve the ideal state. And two, Joel made the point that you must leverage supplier input faster and more directly. Joel concluded by saying that we need to introduce collaborative technology into the process in order to meet those 2 points and to realize those on your path to sourcing excellence and the ideal state. So the market basket on the right-hand side of this slide proves to be a perfect extension of Joel's vision. CBX Cloud is the ultimate total sourcing platform. It allows retailers and brands the ability to manage development and sourcing and production supply chain activities. But the real underpinning success of the platform is the inclusion of the supplier community and giving that community access to the entire process through a supplier exchange portal. So much like Joel was explaining during his presentation. Take a deeper look at the supplier collaboration or the supplier exchange portal. I put a diagram on the screen. This provides a comprehensive view of the market basket that we were just looking at on the previous view, but really it shows how collaboration is possible from the earliest stages in the product development cycle with all parties involved. If you look down towards the bottom of the slide, you'll see a dark band, a supplier portal band. This is a representation of all the activities that the supplier community can participate in through a dynamic back and forth exchange. Again, reaching all the way from the left, the original planning, the ideation, the product specification development, etc., all the way to the right, where we go through final inspections of QA and compliance, etc., and the supplier is interacting through the portal along the entire process. We believe that the CBX Supplier Collaboration Portal is the ideal technological extension of Joel's thought for reaching the ideal state of sourcing excellence. So this concludes our session for today. Our thanks go out once more to Joel Ma for sharing his vision on winning competitions through supplier collaboration. Please be sure to visit our website for additional information and to request a consultation or even a demonstration of the CBX Supplier Collaboration Portal. Thank you for joining, and do keep an eye out for future online events from our community of retail sourcing experts. Okay, Jason, I'm going to hand it back over to you now for any questions that may have come through and for the final wrap-up.
Okay, great. Eric, thanks for that. Great session. Great job, Eric. Great job, Joel. Really informative. Just before we get into the Q&A, we've had a number of questions come in from the audience, a number for Joel, a number of questions for Eric as well. Before we get into that, we've had a few people ask us again, is this going to be available on demand? It absolutely is. Like I said at the start, we're recording today's session. Be on the lookout for an email from us in the next 24 hours on how to access this on demand. If you want to view it again, see what you missed, share it with your colleagues, etc. And I know Joel, towards the end of his presentation, talked about the survey. Another way, like I said at the start of the presentation, at the start of today's webinar, another way to access that survey is at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a number of icons. One of them is a paperclip. It's a resource icon. Simply click on that icon, and you will see some content, specifically a link to the survey that Joel mentioned. Just click on that link, and it'll take you right to the survey within SurveyMonkey. So we've got a lot of questions that came in, not a lot of time to get to them all. Any of them that we missed, we'll make sure that Joel and Eric reach out to you directly. We're going to start with some questions from Joel. We're going to tackle 4 or 5 questions for Joel, and then we'll move to Eric. So, Joel, we're going to start with you. Shelby in Houston, believe it or not, which is where I'm from, Shelby wants to know, Joel, in your experience, what types of benefits do you see the suppliers getting from better collaboration with their retail partners?
Well, I think that obviously the suppliers would like to have a fast return on cash when they do business, take an order from a buyer. And I think with the collaboration, speed to market is part of this benefit out of the collaboration. And that means the supplier is going to get paid sooner since the new products launch sooner. And also the supplier is also feeling that, wow, I'm working with my buyer. I'm having my input to shape that new product item. I want to make sure there's a win-win for both so that it can also benefit my production efficiency and save me costs as well. So sometimes some suppliers would feel like, hey, if it will save me costs, maybe I'll do a cost sharing with the customer. That way we can have a longer-term relationship as well. So I think monetary-wise is really an incentive by collaborating with the customer. And then in terms of reduction in risk exposure as well. So the supplier will know exactly what the buyer is expecting early on. So they can work on the product quality, in terms of scenario planning, calling out all the potential risks or whatever will go wrong. They already thought about it and resolved it ahead so that there's no blaming game at the end after the new product is launched. So I think because of these two major benefits, most of the suppliers would like to get involved earlier. Nobody would like to get at the tail end of the supply chain process and then being told later and say, you did it wrong, please pay up. Here's the claim. So definitely those two are the major benefits to the suppliers.
Okay, awesome. We've got another one. This is coming from Danny. Danny wants to know, Joel, on average, how much cost reduction can be achieved from stronger supplier collaboration?
Now, if we answer directly, I have seen also in my line of work experience and also talking to other peer companies, I think a 10 to 20% of potential cost saving is achievable. Now, but remember, in my presentation, I did share about the relationship that we develop with the supplier that we're working with, we're collaborating with, needs to be genuine, need to be strong. You cannot be just expecting cost saving like a tactical procurement expectation. Hey, I want supplier A, you need to give me 10% cost saving on this project. Well, it needs to be a longer-term relationship, and both sides feel that there are long-term benefits in this. As a result, they come up with cost-saving ideas, which can result in 10 to 20% cost saving.
Okay, great. We're going to hit you with a couple more, Joel, before we move over to Eric, because we've got a few questions for him. We want to make sure that we can fit in some questions for Eric. So Ian wants to know, Joel, do you see better collaboration as a way to increase customer loyalty? And what benefits will the consumer see from this type of retailer/supplier relationship?
I do see better collaboration as one of the ways to increase consumer loyalty. I think when the consumer becoming aware that the close collaboration between the retailer and the supplier, and it will enable the transparency. I'll give you one example about food industry. Well, food safety is on the radar and concern of every consumer, every family. Where the food comes from, what ingredients go into it, was there enough check and balance, everything. And so when they know that the retailer they are shopping at, working closely with the supplier or strategic supplier and building a transparent supply chain on new product launch, and they feel more reliable and more confident that what they're buying is what they're seeing. And also that I feel the consumer can see as a benefit is that, well, the new products are meeting their needs, combining both the marketing side of the retailer and the techno know-how of the supplier who is in that arena, in that kind of category for production. So the engineering team of the supplier working, partnering with the retailer or the buyer organization, they're combining the best talent, resource to come up with a new product that meets the consumer needs. So as a consumer, I would love to see more happening because that way, truly, the new product is meeting my needs versus they didn't do enough research or versus that they didn't do enough scenario planning and having quality issue later. So that, to me, is a direct benefit to a consumer.
Okay, great. And one more for you, Joel. This is coming from Simona. Simona wants to know, and it's related to the survey. Hi, Joel. I'd be happy to take your survey, but wanted to ask, can I get a copy of the survey results?
Definitely. I will make the executive summary of the survey findings available. So if you will go into the URL provided, take the survey in SurveyMonkey, and leave your email address, and we'll be able to send you the executive summary of the findings as soon as possible when the result is analyzed and consolidated.
Fantastic. So what we're going to do now, we've got a few questions coming in for Eric. Want to spread the wealth, don't want to leave Eric out on all the fun. So we've got 2 or 3 questions for Eric, and then we're going to wrap it up. Okay, Eric, this first question that we have for you is coming from Shelby. Shelby wants to know, Eric, on average, using your platform, how much time can be saved in bringing new products to market?
Well, that's a great question. And of course, it depends on the complexity of the product types or the categories for which we see across all of our retailers and brands. But typically, I can tell you that we see about 6 to 12 weeks, in total supply chain compression. CBX Cloud provides for a seamless, real-time communication platform for retailers and brands and suppliers to collaborate. Simply by eliminating or replacing disparate emails and misplaced spreadsheets with messaging forums can cut weeks from the process. So I would say on average about 6 to 12 weeks in total supply chain compression.
Great. We've got this next one is coming from Syed. Syed wants to know, he said, we're in the process of looking for a solution, Eric, to better manage our sourcing operation and suppliers in the process. How long does it take to be up and running on the CBX platform?
Syed, appreciate that question. That's probably a top 3 question I get in every single presentation. Supplier and factory management actually are 2 areas where we see high or rapid time to value. And we really strongly encourage customers to begin their implementation in these modules. When you include some prerequisite configuration in the system for user enrollment and supplier onboarding and just general system deployment, I say on average customers can be up and running in about 90 days' time.
Great. So we're going to take one more question. We have more coming in. Like I mentioned earlier, we want to stay within time, right? So if any questions that Eric and Joel haven't been able to get to, they will reach out to you directly if you're interested in a one-on-one conversation or an email back and forth. But we're going to take one more, then we're going to wrap things up. This last one, Eric, is from Chris. Chris said, one of your slides, Eric, mentioned quote and sample. Can the CBX Cloud manage sample requests and quotes from multiple vendors and compare?
Chris, great question. Yeah, and I probably didn't spend as much time on this as I should have when I was explaining the platform. But CBX Cloud, it's an ideal platform for managing side-by-side quote comparisons from multiple suppliers, which can be a real time saver for sourcing reps and for merchants. So that's one thing I should have pointed out. Additionally, specific to your question, regarding sample management, certainly CBX Cloud has very robust capability in this area. And perhaps even more valuable than what's on the web-based platform itself is our mobile sample management app, which allows inspections and approvals to be made on the go. And as you could imagine, this, of course, significantly speeds up the process for folks that are responsible for approving samples and moving on to a production cycle. So lots of robust capability there, and would be pleased to do a follow-up and share that with you in some detail, Chris.
Awesome. And that's all we're going to take for questions. If you have any that weren't answered, like I said, we'll get back in touch with you. Go ahead. If you didn't have a chance to ask questions, send them in. We'll reach out to you post-event. But that's going to conclude the webinar session for today. We stayed within the time frame, which is always a good thing. We want to thank everybody again for joining us for today's webinar. And then one more gentle reminder, or actually 2 more. One, you'll see an email from us within the next 24 hours on how to access this on demand. So if you want to reinforce what you learned, if you didn't join us today, want to see what you missed, you'll be able to get access to that on-demand version no later than tomorrow. And then finally, be on the lookout, like Eric mentioned on his last slide, for future online events, future webinars coming up from CBX in 2018. Eric, Joel, thanks for the time. Thanks again, everybody. Have a great rest of the week. Bye-bye.